Hey there, creepy peeps. My name is Nightmare Maven and I love talking about horror. I also kind of love talking about Stephen King. Whether it's good or bad, it's always an interesting discussion. I don't know if you guys still like these videos. That's a lot to put in the intro. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. So have you found my channel? Hopefully you stick around for a while. If you don't, that's okay. If you're returning though, welcome back. Happy to see you again. As you can tell from the title, we are talking about Stephen King's Needful Things. That rhymes and I love it. I both regret reading this behemoth right at the beginning of the year, and I'm also kind of happy to have it behind me now. Should have done the 3-day thing like it. If you're not familiar with Needful Things, however, just really quick, the book takes place in the town of Castle Rock, where a new store called Needful Things has just opened up. The owner, Leland Gaunt, seemingly has something for everybody, but of course, everything has a price. Gaunt sells his goods at dirt cheap, but also asks for a favor in return at a later point in time. Gaunt starts cashing in these favors in the form of very violent pranks on people in the town of Castle Rock, which causes everything to go to hell in a handbasket. Kind of literally. I feel like I have slightly more authority to say this now because I have read it, which is like double the size of this one, but this one dragged in so many spots. Like legitimately there were moments where I just had to put the book down for the day because I just got to a part that was just so boring that it was a slog to get through. And I feel like that is something that is hit or miss with Stephen King. A lot of people don't mind the long-windedness, and they appreciate how King takes the time to give us this, you know, very detailed backstory for every character. I'm somebody who has said numerous times that I prefer well-developed characters over pretty much anything else. I feel like Stephen is out here challenging that though. Sometimes don't see why every single character needs multiple chapters. I'm totally fine with spending this much time developing the main characters, but the side characters, I feel like we could get to a similar level of like understanding about their character in a little bit less time. I feel like it's been really hit or miss with me reading his books so far. Like sometimes I feel like his books move really fast, and other times I feel like they're just drag and drag and drag. And I really kind of can't guess what books of his are gonna make me feel that way, because I didn't feel that way really with it. Definitely not as many times as I did in this one, and this is half the size of that book. The dilemma I'm having though with that is, as much as I kind of hate to admit it, a lot, not all, but a lot of that like character buildup and just buildup in general that got kind of long-winded and boring at some parts was kind of necessary to the chaos that ensues at the end of the book. Ultimately, when we got there, it was a fun time, but I feel like it was just a slog getting through it. I felt the same way about The Outsider. Speaking of that, I love this small town setting in particular. I've not read anything that takes place in Castle Rock. I think maybe 1 or 2 of the books I've read so far mention it by name, but I know it says the last Castle Rock story. I don't think I've read anything else that actually takes place in Castle Rock. I say like this small town, I mean like just small town America in general, because I feel like that's one of King's specialties is, you know, highlighting the darkness that kind of hides in the corners and nooks and crannies of these small towns, right? It was a super interesting way to highlight that with Leland Gaunt's character, who really just uses information he gathers about the townspeople and words to incite absolute chaos. That's kind of like the stereotype or cliche of small towns, and especially in movies and books and TV, right? That everybody knows everybody and everybody knows each other's secrets, and there's little like spats and slights and things, but nothing that gets like truly dark and violent. But Gaunt exacerbates these like little spats to the point where they do become violent. So after I finished reading this, of course I did, you know, like your general Google search about it just to read what other people thought about it, information about the book. And on a lot of sites, like a lot of sites, and right there on Google, the Google summary right there on the front page when you search it, the very first thing that gets mentioned before the book is actually summarized is that this is Stephen King's first book out of drug and alcohol rehabilitation. I find interesting to point out, like right off the bat, I feel like they're really trying to set a tone. I don't really know what they're going for. It's just interesting. Reading that in retrospect, like seeing that so many times, I feel like maybe people pointed it out because I guess it kind of makes sense with all these different characters in the book that have these tragic backstories, not necessarily any that involve like drug or alcohol use. There's really only 2 characters that have that issue, but all of these characters have these like secrets or backstories that involve hurting other people essentially, and maybe people were reading like some sort of guilt from this, or I don't really know. I don't know Stephen King personally. I just thought that was interesting, and it got me thinking about like why people felt the need to like continuously mention that. And they would like, at least no articles that I found talked about it beyond that. It was more just like an interesting tidbit that they felt the need to lead with. But there were parts of this book that were so incredibly dark and kind of like flippantly so. Like it's just, I don't know, just kind of mentioned in like a sentence, and I did like a quadruple take. Like, that's it? That's all we're writing about this? Like, what the fuck? That's really fucked up. I have 2 examples, which I am gonna read. So they're short sentences, but content warning for animal cruelty and suicide. There's the scenes like Brian, who is just this little, I think he's like 10 or 11 or something like that in the book, who kills himself over like the favor that he did for Mr. Gaunt. And then Polly, who finds pictures of a woman having intercourse with a dog while on her like errand for Mr. Gaunt. Just so dark. They took me out of it for a minute because they're just so casually mentioned. So I'm gonna read 2 sentences during Polly's little expedition for Mr. Gaunt. She looked into the can and saw what Mr. Gaunt had told her she would see: a bundle of gold bond trading stamps and several fading photographs of a woman having sexual intercourse with a collie dog. And then later on in that chapter, now Polly is burning the contents that she found in the can, and it says, then she cast the match aside and dipped the papers down to produce the maximum draft. The woman was malnourished and hollow-eyed. The dog looked mangy and just smart enough to be embarrassed. Brian's death in the book earlier on is given a lot more time because he's one of the main characters of the book, but immediately following the chapter in which those 2 lines I just read are in, we cut to another character. So the beginning of the chapter starts, Ace Merrill rolled out of bed around the same time that Brian Rusk was blowing his head off 30 miles away. That just it just feels far too casual for what happened and how intense that scene was, and how intense just thinking about the idea of that in general is, let alone it happening to a kid, let alone the kid's like 7-year-old brother witnessing it. I feel like nobody had to tell me that Stephen King was like going through it when he wrote this book. I could tell. I feel like I have to say this every time I talk about his books. I do realize what decade these books were written in, and it doesn't mean I am gonna read them any differently. I'm reading them now when I am the age that I am, when I have the experience that I have, I'm not turning that off for anything. So I want everybody to keep that in mind as I talk about these next two parts that I'm not going to read excerpts from. I'm just going to mention them briefly. Among the numerous characters in Castle Rock that we meet, two other parts that really took me out of it are the mention of the one black character we have in Castle Rock, Eddie Warbutton? Wharton? Something like that. His first name is Eddie, I remember that. Whose part is really small comparatively to everything else going on, but in the short amount of time he's in the book, the amount of times the N-word is thrown around. Also an even briefer mention of two gay characters in the book, but definitely enough time to make it known that they're not only gay, but they are pedophiles, because that's two separate things. I feel like I run into these issues every time I read a Stephen King book. Normally it's not for those reasons that I just mentioned, although in a lot of his older books he does use the N-word a lot. But my issues usually lie more with his treatment of female characters, overweight characters, children. When I tell you I'm going to be reading Fairy Tale with a fine-tooth comb when it comes out later this year, I feel like reading his newer books are going to be the real deciding point as to like whether I am going to call myself a Stephen King fan at the end of the year or not, which is kind of the whole point of this. I know it seems like really shallow, but like I'm just trying to make it fun. So I'm going to give Needful Things a 3.5 out of 5. It wasn't my favorite. It's going snugly into 5th place, right in front of The Outsider, which is dead last. Out of 6 though, so I guess, you know, context. I still have not seen the film adaptation of Needful Things. My good friend Emma told me that I shouldn't because it's gonna ruin the book for me. I also did a poll on Instagram and a lot of you guys were telling me to go ahead and watch it. I don't know, I guess just keep tuned on my Instagram stories, or maybe I'll try and do one of those little YouTube short things, whatever that is, if I watch it, and just give you my 60-second thoughts on it. So the next books I plan on reading on the Stephen King journey, I'm going to try and go for 2 in the next month. I don't want to say in February because I don't know if I'll finish both of them in February. I'm just going to go for 2 because they're significantly shorter than this. So those books that I'm going to read are The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon and Misery. We have a nice duality here. We have a story that I am very familiar with, having seen the movie many, many times. I'm sure the book is going to differ in some ways. And then we have one that I know zero about. Intentionally. I want to go into it knowing nothing about it. So let me know what you think of these two in the comments if you've read them before, and I will save them and maybe feature them and talk about them in my video review of these two. So yeah, that's all I have for you for this video. Let me know in the comment section. Of course, if you've read Needful Things, let me know what you thought about it in the comments as well. And if you've seen the movie, if you liked it or not. I may watch the movie tonight, so I don't know. Just don't tell Emma, okay? I will see you guys very soon with a new video. Until then, stay strange. Bye!